All right, I am here with Armani Talks here on the Fox Den. I'm really excited to have him as a guest because he has an extremely inspirational story about social anxiety and overcoming fears of public speaking that you all may find extremely relevant as I did. All right, welcome, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
Absolutely. All right. So you can dive into your story. I know you were interested in sharing that, and I am more than happy to hear it and share it with the guests.
For sure, for sure. So my public speaking journey is a very unique one in the way where it all begins when I grew up in a very small village in Bangladesh.
Mm-hmm.
And in this village, it was so small where we all knew each other. We all knew about each other's personality types and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And personally for me, my personality type at that time was known as the village monkey. It was because I was always getting into a lot of trouble. I was always talking a lot. I was always running my mouth. And in many ways, this was actually good for me because I felt really free in this village. I always felt as though that this is exactly where I was going to spend the rest of my life.
Right.
But here's what happened, Jeremy. Unfortunately, in Bangladesh, there was a lot of crime going on around that time, and due to like the massive like rising in crime, my parents realized that it was best for us to start a new life somewhere else. So I personally didn't know where I was going to be going at that time. But we were supposed to find out. So just like that, I ended up packing up all my stuff, saying goodbye to all of my relatives, and we fly from the villages of Bangladesh to the city of Miami, Florida. Now, at this point, you can tell that there is a huge, huge difference between the two areas. One's a village, one's one of the biggest cities in the world. As soon as I got off of the plane, I started to notice a lot of differences off the bat. I noticed that some people with TVs in their palms. They call it Game Boy Colors. I saw some people eating hot dogs on a stick, corn dogs. But the weirdest thing, Jeremy, was people speaking English.
Mm-hmm.
In my village, it was more about us reading and writing in English, but we spoke Bangla at the end of the day. Here, I saw people just effortlessly speaking in English. And it got to a point where it made me a little uncomfortable because now I realized that I was going to have to adjust my mannerisms as well.
Huh.
Well, my school kindergarten, it was going to start in 3 weeks. So I had 3 weeks to learn the English language in a very fluent way where there wasn't an accent.
Right.
Well, I went ahead and studied day in and day out, practiced day in and day out for those 3 weeks. And 3 weeks later, I can confidently say it didn't do a thing. I still had a very strong accent, and I realized that, I was going to have to carry this accent in my first day of school. Well, I had a plan. My plan was that I was going to go to school but not say anything. If I don't say anything, then no one's going to know, that I can't speak English that well.
Right.
Well, the first day I go into class, I succeeded all the way up until the playground time.
Right.
During the playground time, it got to a point where a lot of the kids were curious about who I was.
Right.
And they started asking me a lot of these questions. And at this point, it was the moment of truth. I had to speak. So I started to say who I was and where I'm coming from. And at that point, once I responded, I saw around like 10 to 15 kids looking at me, and they all were silent.
Right.
And some time had passed. And as that time passed, out of nowhere, I hear a chuckle, and then more chuckles, and a whole group of people, all 10 to 15 of them, just start laughing.
Wow.
And yes, and they're talking about how bad my accent is, how they can barely understand me. And in all honesty, they thought I was joking.
Wow.
Yes.
That's traumatic. It definitely
yes.
a foundational memory here.
Yes, and at that point, Jeremy, it really, as you did say, it was traumatic. And at that point, that was a very significant moment in my life. I went from the very talkative village kid to the very shy foreign kid. And I had this dark cloud over my head for the rest of that year. And it didn't only end in that year. I had it for the rest of elementary school, the rest of middle school, the rest of high school. And
Wow.
by the time, yes, and by the time that I was starting college, I was going to study in the College of Engineering. You know, engineers don't have to talk to people that much. It's more about talking to the machines.
Right.
So I felt as though I was going to be very comfortable. But a part of me, I still wanted to figure out this communication thing. Now, I wanted to be that child that I was in my village. I wanted to be very expressive once again. So at that time, I was doing some research, and I came to find out that the number one fear in the world was public speaking. And a part of me realized that if I could handle public speaking, if I could somehow manage to tame that beast, then I would get a lot of confidence back behind my words once again. And around that time, I remember Facebook was really growing, and I see one of my friends who used to have a speech impediment, and he's in these videos like lighting it up on stage, talking in front of like dozens and dozens of people, and it just gave me hope. I realized that if this guy can do it, who struggled with a speech impediment, then what's stopping me?
Right, that's inspiring.
It is, and it inspired me at that moment. And it just so coincidentally happened that the next day, a Toastmasters was coming to my school. And this was one of the first times Toastmasters was making an appearance. It's one of the number one public speaking clubs on the planet. So at that point, I decided that I was going to go with one of my friends. And the goal was just to observe. I was just going to observe and see how the meeting went. But when I went to the meeting, I thought it was going to be very small. It was a huge meeting. I thought it was going to be a little classroom full of people, but it was a legit lecture hall full of people.
Wow.
And I recognized a lot of people there. I remember personally thinking, I really hope I don't get called on stage. And Jeremy, you know how it is. When you really don't want something to happen, just like that, it happens.
Boom. Yeah.
And I'm staying in the back of the arena, and just like that, the Table Topics Master calls me on stage. He calls me on stage and asks me to do a Table Topics. And for your audience who doesn't know what that is, it's a 1 to 2 minute impromptu speech on any kind of random topic.
Right.
Well, my topic was maraca, and I'll be honest, I was thinking of a lot of different angles on what I was going to say. Like, okay,
Sure.
you could start off like this. No, you could start off like that, like this, like that. I was thinking of all these different angles to a point where I was overthinking the entire situation. And when you overthink, you underdo. And I could see a lot of people, people from my class, friends, one of my cousins, all waiting for me to say one word. And the more that I was overthinking and the more time that was elapsing, I just couldn't say anything. And I was choking on stage in front of so many people. And it came to a point where the Table Topics Master got up, put his arm around me, and he was like, listen, good effort, good try. How about we should try next time, bud? And his strange level of compassion actually made me feel worse. It made me feel worse because I was thinking, dang, I really let him down. And for the next few days, all I could remember are all those people that I knew just chuckling on the side, laughing. And it felt a lot like a kindergarten moment being repeated.
Right.
I decided that I was just going to quit. I went back to my very shy life again, and that dark cloud had gotten way darker. Well, around 2 to 3 months had passed. And as those 3 months had passed, I noticed that a lot of the people from that event that day had forgotten about that whole incident. They went ahead and moved on with their lives. But for me, I was unable to move on. I mean, it seemed as though my shyness had gotten worse. It was very difficult to have one-on-one conversations with people. I couldn't raise my hand in the lecture hall, even though I knew the answer to a question. I couldn't even make eye contact with the cashier. And it got so bad to a point, it felt as though that this is how my life was going to be for the next couple of years, or who knows, forever. Well, as I was going about my everyday life, out of the blue moon one day, I had gotten very, very unfortunate news. One of my really close relatives, one of my younger cousins, he actually had an untimely death. He ended up passing away at a very, very young age.
Wow.
Yes. And at that point, um, as strange as it may sound, that moment really gave me much needed perspective. This whole time, I thought this, me choking away the speech was as bad as it could get until something 10 times worse that dwarfed that speech anxiety moment came along. And that untimely death of my cousin, in many weird ways, gave me much needed fire. I was no longer doing this whole public speaking journey just for myself, but rather I was doing it for a life that was taken too soon.
Right.
And at that point, I decided that I was going to carry his memory and I was going to figure this out one way or another for him. That night, I ended up going back to Toastmasters meeting. And as I went back to the meeting, once again, the table topics master asked for volunteers, asked if he should pick anyone. And I was the first person that raised my hand. I said, listen, I'm going to do it. Well, I get on stage, he gives me a topic. I forgot what it was. But this time, Jeremy, all I needed to do was say one word. If I could say one word, then I did better than my last performance.
Yes.
And that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, just say one word. Just say one word, and you're already taking some action. And I was once again falling into that trap of overthinking about how I was going to start. And I was really terrified that the same thing was going to happen again. But this time, I forced myself to say that one word. And soon, that one word turned into two words. A second word turned into the third one, and so on and so on. And I spoke for the entire 2 minutes. At that point, yes, at that point, I had this huge dark cloud over my head my entire life. I had limiting beliefs regarding public speaking, regarding just speaking in general. And that moment allowed me to gain a lot of much needed clarity.
Yes.
Yes, and from there, I went from just table topics to doing more table topics to eventually doing speeches to eventually evaluating other people to eventually becoming a mentor to other needed people. And from there, I became the recruitment chair and the vice president of my Toastmasters club. That allowed me to gain a lot of deep insights regarding the public speaking world, which I now share with my personal brand, Armani Talks.
Yes. Yes. That is amazing. Awesome. That's such an inspiring story to hear because you really take that narrative perspective on something large, some monumental catastrophe happening, and seeing in perspective that the fear, the social anxiety, which is a significant thing, right? I've worked with a lot of clients who have it, but that you have a goal of living the life that your cousin couldn't. That's really inspiring, keeps you moving, because when we do things just for ourselves, sometimes there's not as much a time limit on it, or it doesn't feel as urgent. So when we have anything else that we're living for, any sort of goal, any sort of thing that is really empowering or that helps us to see things in perspective, it's really empowering. And we are doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for the memory of someone we love. I love that you refer to yourself as a social engineer. So you're combining that left brain logic, right brain emotion. I know you had said earlier that it may seem, you've made comment to the fact that it may seem interesting that an engineer is giving social advice, but it only seems interesting on the surface if you don't understand that creativity really requires some constraints. So Van Gogh going through his yellow period and the beautiful sunflower paintings that come from that. Picasso in his blue period. So adding some constraints, adding logic really helps with constructing creativity.
Right.
So I love that you refer to yourself as kind of the creative engineer. And we will get into those. Let's get into the 5 skills that you learned on that journey. Because again, what I love about your website is you go over the foundational events that influence you to be who you are and the 5 skills that you learned from that. So if you just want to briefly bullet point them, and then we can go from there. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because I've read them and I think they're great.
Thank you. So during that journey, Jeremy, I learned 5 particular soft skills. And as you can tell, the first one was public speaking. And once I was able to figure out public speaking, a lot of the social anxiety melted away as well. Because if you could talk to 50 people with ease, now one-on-one conversations becomes a breeze. So that public speaking journey allowed me to learn the second soft skill, which was social dynamics. And that was huge in just understanding how people operate, human nature, and how connections are formed. And by learning that, I was able to delve into emotional intelligence as well. Because for you to maximize your social interactions, emotional intelligence is key. And in order to build emotional intelligence, you have to first be able to empathize with yourself. Once you can empathize with yourself, now it becomes much, much easier to empathize with others. So that was skill set number 3.
Right.
Now, the fourth one was very much tied into the first 2, which is storytelling. In order to be a good storyteller, you need to have a level of creativity, which was the 5th skill. And the beauty about soft skills, Jeremy, is that all of them begin to intertwine with one another. At a certain point, you learn one, and then you kind of find yourself learning the other ones as well.
Absolutely. So again, they're very integrative. One of the coolest things is combining the we would say logic brain of engineering and then the emotion brain of intuition and allowing your emotions to lead you, which you talk about a lot, into that wise mind, which is this dialectical behavior therapy perspective. It's a modality of therapy that takes these seeming opposites, these polarities, and integrates them to be bigger than the sum of their parts. So self-acceptance and self-development, integrating them. So seemingly opposite things like creativity and emotionality, the kind of timeless quality of emotions, and then the strictures of logic. So it's awesome to hear that you're doing that from a really lived experiential perspective and really walking the walk before you talk your Twitter followers and consultees through it. It's pretty cool stuff.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up because creativity as a whole, I mean, it is called structured emotions. So if you just have emotions and you're just kind of like letting them fly, now you're rather impulsive. If you have a method to your madness, now you produce artwork.
Yeah, I love also that you come up with those formulas. So anger, or like processed anger, is wisdom, and unprocessed anger being what was it in your article? Something like that. I can pull it up, but
right. So a healed pain equals wisdom, unhealed pain equals anger.
Yes. So what I'm referring to now, listeners, is Armani's great article on his website called "The Truth About Unhealed Anger," or is it "Unhealing Anger"? It's great. I can link it to my to the podcast link. But one of the things that you hit on is something I work with a lot. So, and I'll switch gears here into more of a therapeutic thing. Men and women, I'm not going to make it a gendered thing, but people, right? People in the Western world tend to, I don't know if it's like this in Bangladesh too. You can speak to that. It'd be great to hear an international perspective. But the masculine narrative of not experiencing emotions, for one thing, that's pathological. For another thing, it's not even historical, because historically, I mean, you have social support, you have men who support each other, you have the Vikings go in tribes. You don't really hear about a lot of lone Vikings conquering a village, right? So how is that? Well, because it's unfeasible. But somehow there's a distorted, perverted view has emerged in the world, in the Western world, is my experience, that to be masculine or to be independent, let's use that word because that's gender neutral, to be independent and to be respectable, be powerful, involves a complete cutoff from emotions. And what I love about your article, again, it's the truth about unhealed anger. It's that if you cut off emotions, not only are you taking away, you're detracting from your life in some very tangible way, but it's impossible because they go, quote, underground. Your emotions become dissociated from you and they become more powerful as you deny them. Now, I've faced this a lot in working with clients. It's maybe men who were in a war or some kind of tragedy and they think that it's behind them. And then they notice that they feel a great deal of isolation or lack of intimacy with their families, with their wives. So, and then maybe anger at a disproportionate stimulus, which you talk about in the article. So I don't know, how is it in Bangladesh? Did you remember any of that? Were you old enough to have noticed gender dynamics like that?
I did notice stuff like that, and it's funny because it's very similar to what you were just describing.
Ah, okay.
There is this notion that you have to suppress the emotions.
Sure.
That's very dangerous because the more you try to suppress the emotion, the more it goes to the gym, works out, and comes back 10 times stronger.
Love the metaphor,
so
yes.
Yes, it's very dangerous to do something like that.
Yeah.
What's 10 times better is to make yourself aware of the emotions.
Yes.
Because ultimately, the main goal is to understand what emotions really are. And that's energy plus a perception. And when you can understand that, you realize there's nothing like sissy about it. It's really about controlling the perception at your own will. So now you can control your energy at your own will.
Right. So, I mean, the big thing is if we don't acknowledge our emotions, we're doomed to be controlled by them. Because if you think about it, living your life in avoidance, if you lived in avoidance of a certain person and you were afraid to encounter them, it would be very easy to perceive that as a lack of control. Is that person controlling you, even though it's a form of avoidance on our part, right? We're trying to avoid that rather than engage with it. It's the same with
our ironic, right?
It is. It absolutely is. So the biggest thing there is, again, for people to, for one thing, disinvest from any sort of Twitter or online advice stream that essentially tells you some simplistic formulas for life that don't require any work. Because, spoiler to that, that's usually false, right? So I love your formulas because they're succinct and they're short, but they're absolutely accurate. Well, how do we know that? Well, because they take development on the part of the individual. They sound easy, and in theory they are. It's the practice that makes all the difference. So like you did, you desensitized your aversion of public speaking, and you did it through the help of making some significance and a meaning out of what you were doing, so that even if you failed, you were moving toward that goal, just a word at a time, 2 words at a time. Now we've got a sentence. Okay. And that's another thing I work with clients toward. It's setting incremental goals. If you have to make them ridiculously small to move forward, do it, because any forward motion is superior to stagnation. So I love that you inspire your readers to do that, because you don't complete a speech all at once. You complete it sentence by sentence, word by word, syllable by syllable even. And so see it that way, the anxiety reduces, it desensitizes. And when you recognize that you're not going to die, you're not going to necessarily, you're going to live it down, so to speak, if you fail or stutter or hesitate or do anything wrong in a public speaking venue, you will survive it and you can gather yourself and do it again. I mean, you essentially desensitized yourself to it on a therapeutic level, just on your own, which I have to commend, because it was, yeah, absolutely. You were rationally approaching this and then using the energy from a tragedy and transforming that into something adaptive in your cousin's honor. So I think it will be extremely helpful for listeners to hear this story, because they can recognize, you know, I can overcome my social anxiety. It's doable. But
absolutely,
it's a cop out. And so some of it has to do with pride. Some of it has to do with, well, I don't want people to see me fail. I don't want that to happen. And when it melts away and you recognize I'm living a life that someone in my family couldn't, I don't care anymore about possibly failing. There's very, very therapeutic element to that.
Yes. And one thing that I always encourage people to do is whenever you have a goal,
Yeah.
Question the why of your why. So
Yes.
basically, it's kind of like this. Okay, well, I want to learn public speaking. Well, that's great. I mean, that's just a goal. But what you're doing right now is you're only engaging your logical side. You're just talking about the what. And the
Right.
question is, why do I want to learn public speaking? Well, I want to get better in front of a crowd. Why do you want to do that? So I could become more confident. Oh, so you're really doing public speaking so you could become more confident. And why do you want to become more confident? So I'm not always hesitant to speak in front of people. Now, as you're getting to the core, you'll notice that this logical thing is turning very emotional. And once you turn this goal into an emotional thing and tie it to your emotions, now you feel 10 times more invested. For me, initially, it's like I was just learning public speaking, but eventually, the emotional side was I was doing it for my cousin. And when you do that, no matter what roadblocks you face along the way, you'll find a way to rise above it.
That's right. So Viktor Frankl, one of the founders of existential psychotherapy, that field of the therapeutic profession, survived Holocaust internment. And he said in his book, Man Search for Meaning, a man with meaning can bear anything. So when you create a narrative that matters to you, it really serves you well. I want to talk too about your amazing article about toxic people, because again, you hit on stuff and you have some insight that goes beyond the typical Twitter guru sphere of people who just tweet out stuff that sounds good. You really hit on some uncomfortable truths, I'll say. One of which is that there's not just the type of toxic person who to your face maybe has personality disorder symptoms of borderline personality or narcissistic personality, things of that nature. But the people who are more insidious, right, which often the death by 1,000 cuts is much easier to fall into. It's not one big blow that you learn to avoid. It's less painful. And we're talking about the toxic people who encourage you to fritter your time away, to waste it. I was very impressed that you talk about that, because that's a difficult subject. And you even address that it's difficult to cut these people out of your life. I want to hear what inspired you to write that. Any kind of stories you have on that, because I was really, really interested in that.
Yes. So I mentioned that there's the toxic people that hate you, like haters, snakes, but then there's the toxic people that love you. And the story about this is when I was in college, and I was right around at that area where I was wrapping up college. And it's like this area where now we're all wondering, well, what's next?
Right.
Now, if you know the general public's like, oh, well, all right, now we're done with school. So what are we going to do? We're going to party a lot more. So a lot of my close friend groups at that time, they were, we're over 21, of course. We're going to bars, we're going to clubs, and, we're finding all these ways to entertain ourselves. Now, personally for me at that time, I wanted to create something bigger. I wanted to create a vision. I wanted to create something that was ultimately going to outlast me. But whenever I was trying to work hard, I was really trying to stay focused. A lot of these good friends of mine, friends that I really had love for, would be like, Armani, stop working so hard. Just come and grab a beer with us.
Right.
And at that time, I was like, all right, well, why not? And it just started happening like this week by week. It just kind of felt like my life was becoming very repetitive. And eventually, I made this epiphany where one weekend, a lot of them went back home. There was a holiday time coming up.
Right.
And during that time, I mean, since everyone was gone, I was able to finally get some work done. And I was thinking, like, how am I getting so much work done now versus like these other weeks? And I was able to understand and diagnose what the problem was. And
right.
These people that I was hanging out with, my immediate circle, as cool as they were, as much as they loved me and as much as I loved them, they were toxic for my self-improvement journey.
Right.
I wasn't going to level up with them, mainly because they didn't have goals in their particular life. So what I personally meant by that article was that a lot of people, like, say you're someone that doesn't have any significant goals in your life, you're someone who's just kind of showing up day by day.
Right.
This group of people won't really be toxic for you. This group of people will friends. It will be completely normal. But if you want to be one of those groups of people that breaks out of the comfort zone and you're really challenging yourself to be that 1 out of 50, now more people without goals that whether they love you or not become toxic. So there are two groups of people when you're leveling up.
And I love this level up attitude too. That's a helpful little schematic or heuristic to use when thinking about growth and development. Can you tell us more about what inspired you to go with that metaphor? I think it's brilliant.
Thank you. And I wrote a book recently called Level Up Mentality, a guide to re-engineer for confidence. And in this book, I discussed the core principle of the level up mentality, which is you stop competing with other people. But when you compete with other people, you're being pulled in too many directions. Rather, be inspired by other people. Use your jealousy as a desire or as a compass for your desire. What is it that's sparking the jealousy in the first place? And use them as inspiration and grab their best pieces. Now try to incorporate it by competing with your prior day self. The main mantra of the level up mentality is that you make today better than yesterday and tomorrow better than today. You follow this formula and you're going to level up in no time. But Jeremy, the main framework and reasoning behind this is because I used to be that guy that felt as though I was making some improvements, and then I would see someone else that was making more improvements. And I completely neglect everything that I did. And I'm just like, well, why is this guy doing so much better than me?
Comparison mentality. Yes. Another cognitive distortion there. Talk to me about that. What I love is how you encourage your readers and listeners on your podcast to stop comparing, to show gratitude. And I love your view of gratitude as being grateful for our own victories, grateful for the people in our lives. You really expand on that. And that's something I don't see a lot of, is expounding on gratitude. It's very gutsy in a way in our day and age, because gratitude is on, I'm sure you've noticed this, it's on the decline. I mean, we could get into the psychological reasons for that. For one thing, we know people with narcissistic personality disorder can't comfortably show gratitude or remorse, right? And we know from studies of incoming college freshmen throughout the preceding decades that narcissism was on the rise. So it entails that sense of gratitude. Well, why be grateful? This is just what should happen. I'm entitled to this. So I want to hear more what inspired you to really hit on gratitude, because you have a lot of resources on that on your website.
Right. And what really made me want to pursue this is gratitude really allows your wins in life to blend in together.
Yes.
Because a lot of people, they're like, well, I'll be grateful when I get this big win. And they completely forget about all these little wins that they're getting to get that big win. So that's something that I used to struggle with back in the days. I was always waiting for that next accomplishment and the next accomplishment. And I was never looking behind to see whoa, I had a lot of mini accomplishments for me to get here.
Right.
So the thing with gratefulness is that you genuinely rewire your mentality rather than being this scarcity mentality person who, when someone else wins, you think you lost.
Right.
Now you're reconditioning your mindset for abundance. When Jeremy wins, now I win too, because Jeremy's podcast is doing well, gives exposure to me, and then boom, that's the way to do it, versus a scarcity minded dude that's going to be like, well, why is Jeremy podcast doing well and not mine? You know what I'm saying?
We can see. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Again, it's a lack too of the zero-sum game mentality. I think gamification of culture, which can be used for good, right? Say like level up mentality. I love this book called Super Better by Jane McGonigal. Have you ever heard of her? She's a big game design person who did a TED Talk about gamifying your life, your goals to get where you want to go. Have you heard of her?
No, I haven't, but I'm going to check her out.
Yeah, she's neat.
Smart.
Yeah, she's pretty cool. To put it mildly, but I think the negative gamification of society and the games that we've internalized, such as the zero-sum game, Prisoner's Dilemma. I mean, there's a time for those. The problem is that when we develop a paradigm or a schema that's based on win or lose, total win or total loss of us and the other person, then it takes us away from that collaborative perspective that you're talking about, which is so valuable. So that's the key hallmark of a lot of the successful people on Twitter who offer self-help, or really in the outside world, other therapists who aren't looking to carve a niche and protect everything and protect their legacy through keeping it secret and not helping others or not linking up with other therapists. It's really that collaborative approach, because that signals confidence, altruism, empathy, all those things that really draw people in. So that brings me to another thing. I love how you're discussing mindfulness, that in a way, because if you're always focused on your next goal, there's no appreciation for the present. There's no savoring of the present. There's no gratitude without mindfulness. I hadn't really considered that till listening and reading your work. So one thing that I took away is you reiterate, and I think that's good, it bears repeating to your audience, that insight and awareness, but that's really, those are the first steps toward healing. And it requires courage to admit your own emotional unintelligence, which is a great phrase that you use. Because, I mean, if we have emotional intelligence, we should, emotional ignorance is good.
Yes. And it does take courage. I mean, generally does take courage, because nowadays, I mean, a lot of people, they're like, well, first of all, a lot of people say that, like, they don't need it in the first place. So when you say you don't need it in the first place, now you completely rule out any opportunity to grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure you deal with that a lot, where people are like, oh, I'm here because I have to be, I don't know if I'm even going to see any benefits. And now you have to make this person aware that they may have an issue in the first place.
Yeah. So one of the big things is, if somebody views everyone else as the problem, that's called an egocentric issue, where their ego, the problem is within the personality. I mean, they don't see it. They think that their symptoms are fine. That's usually a personality disorder phenomenon. And then if something is an ego alien or ego dystonic problem, like depression or anxiety, someone views it as it's called ego alien because it's outside their ego, or their reality testing. It's outside who they are. They see it as an encroaching issue, like, hey, my social anxiety is bothering me. They don't see it as, I am my anxiety and people should work around it. So you're right. The first step, people have to be willing. The first step to healing is acknowledging that something's a problem. It doesn't have to be, it's your fault that it's a problem. People sometimes have more high-strung temperaments. Type A people care about winning more. When we normalize it and recognize that people are going to have different temperaments, different physical responses to stress, it's less tricky to talk about these things, and it's less embarrassing, right? It's not as patronizing when I explain, hey, look, maybe you have a lower threshold, so it's easier to get to trigger anxiety. We can expand that window of tolerance. You can tolerate more. It's just going to take some work. And that's where you come in, talking about incrementally building up the tolerance to public speaking. If you can get through that, you get through a lot. But I think speaking with you and reading your work has really helped me to recognize that it's that unconditional positive regard for your audience. It's speaking to them in a way where you don't underestimate them and you treat them with dignity that makes a good motivational speaker. And it comes, I mean, that's from Carl Rogers in the mid-20th century, his person-centered therapy. So he got kind of a rap for being the tell me how you feel guy. And that's the starting point. I love that you start there, and then it's like, okay, so get ready for this ride. Recognize that you have worth now followers, but readers, but I'm going to take you on a journey to understand how you can get more emotionally intelligent. I think it's a great place a great way to do it.
Right. And it's
ethical.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it's definitely one of these topics that is very polarizing, where a group of my audience, they'll love it. They're like, oh, whoa, like no one really talks about emotional intelligence.
Right.
There's this other group at times they'll be like, I don't know, what is this emotional intelligence? Does it even exist? And kind of like you're like, I didn't know that there were people that don't think it exists. That's why it's good to delve into this topic, and that's what we're doing, because it is a topic that a lot of people is so innovative, where people are like, well, they're a little iffy about it. But you'll be surprised, Jeremy. It's one of the most polarizing topics that I personally discuss from the
What,
five
emotional
self-care.
intelligence?
It is, yeah.
No, I'm not. I would have been surprised if I had my head stuck up my own profession. And being on Twitter and being aware of the trends of different masculinity movements and things like that, I think that we can throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that emotional intelligence can be used as this sort of thing to beat men over the head with, or beat people over the head with who aren't constantly emoting and feeling and sharing their feelings, which, let's be honest, and I like that you discussed this in your article about anger. It's not healthy to show deep emotion and cry and do things like that in front of people that you can't trust, right? So
Right.
you hit that perfect disclaimer, but that doesn't mean you don't show it ever. And it's easier for humans, not anyone in particular, but for human nature, we want answers, not ambiguity. So when we hear an easy thing like don't show emotions ever, just don't worry about the nuance, you don't have to care when's the right time to share it. You share it and there's the risk of being humiliated. Don't share it and you never risk that. That's appealing to a lot of people. And so when people hear about emotional intelligence, they often put it in this category of hyper touchy-feely stuff that
Absolutely.
can open them to hurt. And I think a lot of men who've been hurt by women before, for whatever reason, in their lives, they turn to the idea of destroying their inner emotional world, which, for one thing, is, as you've said, impossible. And I know that too. You just dissociate. You break off a part of your personality that you essentially keep quarantined, and you numb everything. You don't selectively numb because that's impossible. We just dull ourselves to all intense experiences, and you become a bit of a zombie. So obviously, I don't have a very high view of that, but emotional intelligence has gotten a bad rap. And I think part of it is the people that use that term a lot are beating people over the head who don't always share their emotions. And so some men in particular have said essentially, F that. I don't want to go down that road. But what they don't understand is you have these books like the 48 Laws of Power, which by any other word is a primer on emotional intelligence to a huge degree. Are you familiar with that book, 48 Laws of Power?
By Robert Greene?
Yes, I figured
Yes.
you would be. But a lot of the stuff in there, like never outshine your master, I mean, look at it as never go out of your way to annoy or humiliate the person who's your boss. What is that a form of? Social intelligence. So I think if they want to throw out social intelligence, they're doing it to their own detriment because it's relevant in online dating. It's relevant in interpersonal interactions. It's relevant everywhere. And otherwise, all you're doing is basically regurgitating a bunch of mottos that aren't tailored to the situation at hand.
Right, absolutely. And it's kind of like the biggest misunderstandings is of people that aren't aware of what emotional intelligence is. They think you're using your emotions to make emotional decisions, while in reality, emotional intelligence means understanding your emotions to make rational decisions. It's a difference.
And it's a very Hellenistic Greek tradition phenomenon we're talking about. That's why some men really like Stoicism, and again, a lot of women do too. Don't want to make it a gendered thing, but it's got definitely a rap for being the more male-centric stuff because it looks at emotions as, okay, these exist, they're not reality. We can use them as a leverage point to make decisions based on our needs and wants because those are relevant.
Right.
Certainly. You can't choose a career based on what you think you should do because that's not sustainable and you'll burn out. I've had clients like that. We're like, I just thought I should do something that makes money, what my parents said to do. Why am I not happy? And we explore it and they recognize, wait a minute, I never made a decision based on emotion. It's always been, this makes sense. Making sense and your passion in life are not always going to match. But you can make sense of the way to make money through it. I mean, I'm not going to get on that whole tangent. But one thing I really enjoy in respect, I should say, is that you encourage readers, like beyond your articles, if they find themselves in a deep state of depression, you suggest that they get professional help. So, and you literally put disclaimer, I'm sharing what has worked for me in my life. I'm looking at it now. And I think that's really relevant, right? Because maybe someone has some biochemical imbalances that are best suited by a combination of therapy and medication, because we know that combo works better than either one in isolation, by the way, listeners. From research, we know that. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here in the research world. But I really appreciate that because you're not saying, well, if this doesn't work for you, you're just lost beyond all help. No.
Right. Because the thing is, the emotional world is so ambiguous. So
It is.
what works for me may necessarily not work for someone else. Now,
Right.
if they've tried those tactics and they're realizing it's not working, I have no problem. Like I'm a big fan of, I have friends that are therapists. I know therapists, and I know that they're great at what they do. So
Right.
Seek help in that regard. There's I encourage it.
Yeah, and therapists, many of them are great. I think we could do a better job at making some of the stuff palatable and understandable to people in a digestible format, like what you do. You take a lot of stuff that's very therapeutic, which is a huge compliment. You're not just riffing off of things that may work and may be okay. I mean, because I've read some stuff that's terrible. Thank God. I mean, I only interview people that really have a lot of positive stuff to say, or that are respected for some reason or the other. So this just applies to others out there, other accounts that maybe treat their audience kind of with a heavy hand, and or maybe more theatrical or rude about it. It's like, okay, I mean, that's kind of there's such a, I guess what I'm saying is there's such an overlap among people who are playing a character and people who really legitimately care. And I get that you're not really, this is who you are. You're speaking from authenticity. And I think that's extremely helpful to people out there, so that they can understand this is not a persona. This is not a facade. If it were, then it's unsustainable. This is how you really grew and developed from a real social anxiety. And you have some real bona fides here. You have some real claim to anxiety. You went through a lot. You had some trauma from people really being bigoted and horrible. Kids are terrible. Especially with things that are different. So you went through the ringer and you came out the other side as a public speaker. So nobody has an excuse to say, well, not me, I stutter. Not me, I speak too quiet. No, look at Armani, look what he's done, then get back to me.
And that's the ultimate, the goal, Jeremy. I'm glad you noticed that, because ultimately I could be the guy that's like getting on my blog and always talking about my wins in life, and oh, look at me, I spoke in front of this, I spoke in front of that. But I try to talk about my downfalls, talk about taking my first speech, talk about being made fun of in that playground, because that's what that creates that little kinetic energy in someone else. Be like,
absolutely.
Right. Oh, whoa, look at that bridge from point A to point B. And I just want to show that public speaking is a skill set. It's something that can be learned, practiced, and mastered. And if you're willing to do that, and if you have a strong why, then you'll figure it out. It just requires that you have that strong why in the first place.
It does. And it requires some dedication to creativity, because those often don't come together. Like logic and creativity don't seem that congruent. But I mean, the Julia Cameron in her morning pages exercises, you sit down and you outrun the mental editor. We were talking about that before the podcast cut out, that you talk about the idea that you can't be in editing mode while creating. Speak about that a little more, because I really want to leave people with some actionable stuff on creativity here.
Sure. So basically my formula for unlimited creativity content is you lead with emotions and you edit with logic.
Right.
But unfortunately, in today's world, everyone does like the opposite.
Right.
Logic, they're focusing on grammar, sentence structure, punctuation. And then once they're done with that, they're trying to sprinkle in some creativity. So they find the whole writing process or creative process as a whole very difficult.
Right.
Flip that when you can just have like a rough idea of what you want to talk about, and now you're just free flowing. You're just releasing with your emotions. Wherever it's pointing you, the words will just form on the page. Then you take a 1 hour break. Okay, do whatever you want. And now you come back, and now you're reading back your work, and now you're focusing on punctuation, sentence structure, grammar, all that kind of stuff. But what you're doing is you're taking a structured approach to creativity. You're first getting your ideas out there, then you're organizing it. Unfortunately, like in school, for example, we're taught, oh, well, there's narrative, there's expository, right within these two realms. And you're graded so much on your logic. if you use the wrong grammar, like you get the red mark, and it's indicating to your subconscious mind, whoa, this is bad. And when you get out into the real world, there's a lot of people that never unleash their creativity again because they think it's work or they think it's something that's associated with little kids.
Right.
While in reality, there's frameworks for it.
Right. I love it. Yeah. Looking at the education system and how it can be somewhat anathema, it can be kind of a killer of creativity. I think that's really going to be illuminating to a lot of listeners. They're going to have an aha moment, because I can't tell you how many people I've worked with, male and female, who suffered from ADHD that was undiagnosed or things because school stuff was presented in a way that logic and I know to some extent you have to develop the mechanics of a language before you can go off and really focus on creativity. But it's certainly possible to do a better job of teaching them concurrently or varying a little bit, because people with ADHD really will start to tune out when it's all drudgery and you don't get the fun part of writing out of the gate, and you just tune off. So,
right.
Yeah.
In many cases, like, and I get that too, like you need logic at the end of the day.
Sure.
There's this thing where it's like logic helps you learn the frameworks, and then creativity allows you to explore with those frameworks. It's kind of like the quote you hear, you learn the rules to see how you could break the rules.
Yes. I love that quote, by the way. Yeah.
Yes. And just one more thing about the school system. I do believe the school system conditions many people to focus on the results over the process.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, which in many ways kind of takes away the gratitude that people have to kind of recondition themselves back with in the real world. Because in school, you're not rewarded for how hard you studied. You're rewarded for your test score.
Right.
And now you're in the real world, you never give yourself unfortunately, you don't give yourself a pat on the back for how hard you're working, how much progress you're making. You're just kind of thinking, oh, well, I don't have this yet. So this is something I want your listeners to understand, that it's very important to reverse that mentality once you get into the real world. Really focus on the process so you can get the optimal results.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more, because in the therapy world, I have to teach people, don't beat yourself up for an attempt that didn't go anywhere or that fell short of what you wanted, because that's going to teach your brain. You're essentially punishing yourself for trying, right? From a behaviorist perspective, we know that what we reward, we continue, and what we punish is extinguished, or that's the way it goes, unfortunately.
Yes.
So we have to create those little goalposts for ourselves, and that's where gamification in that book, Super Better, that Jane McGonigal wrote, she talks about essentially creating rewards when you level up. And she uses a lot of that similar language. And we have to do that on our own as adults. That's the big divide now between college and the years preceding it and in adult life. And that's where people like your friends that were toxic to you, right? They're not getting that you have to become your own game master. You have to develop your own goals, goalposts, little rewards throughout life. You don't get an A on a test anymore and get that dopamine hit if you're very conscientious of academics. You get an A on a more abstract level in a meeting when you get in the pat on the back for doing a really great presentation for like a budget thing at work, right? You have to introduce those rewards yourself and start seeing things through a narrative lens as a way to reward yourself. I love how all this is coming together now.
It all is coming together. It's so funny. That's why in many cases you'll notice people that were amazing students in the school system, when they get out into the real world, a lot of them struggle with business.
You're right.
They feel like they've studied. They feel like they've consumed the right content. How come their business isn't immediately taking off? Now, compare this to the person who struggled in school. But they were great with collaborating, organizing group events. In many cases, they could be like B or C students, but when they get out into the real world, they can take punches to the face and keep on continuing, which is something that's really needed in the world of business.
Right.
It's really funny how these kind of dynamics play out.
It is.
Right. And at the end of the day, it's like a lot of the school system academics, you're not graded on your creativity. You're not graded on your mental toughness, your perseverance, your ability to collaborate, your ability to regulate emotions. That's stuff that we're talking about in this episode, which is in many elements a true sign of intelligence.
Bingo. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I think the school system is now catching up in some areas, because there are schools now that actually teach mindfulness to kids and teach emotion regulation stuff in preschool and kindergarten. Now that I commend fully, and I don't know how widespread that is, because I read it in these books about mental health and things, and it's like, that's great. That's probably a few schools out there. As it catches on, though, which it is, I think now, then we'll start to see some major results. And I think we need that. That's almost mandatory in an age of instant distractibility, instant distractions in the form of phones, in the form of anything online. You can easily avoid any kind of discomfort that used to be a form of growth, right? So if you didn't want to do public speaking, let's look at an alternate path your life could have taken. I see people posting about things like they can't do group projects because of anxiety, and they get like a psychiatrist or somebody to write a letter for them. Look at how that reinforces that fear, that avoidant response. And so then the person never learns how to deal in a team or never learns how to public speak. It would have been a completely different route for you if you had done that. But you had that internal motivation to say no to avoidance, to say, I'm going to engage. I am not going to disengage. I'm going to engage with my fears and overcome them. That's the hallmark of development. And I'm a little scared that we're moving away from that in society, and we're moving into, well, if you have anxiety over something, always avoid it. I think when you have anxiety and it's debilitating, go to a therapist, go to someone who's going to treat you with empathy and not be cruel to you, but do not quarantine that part of your life off and write it off and say, I'm never going to be better at this.
And in many cases, Jeremy, when you do something like that, it spills over to other parts of your life. Where in the story, when I did take that break from public speaking, where I actually quit, it started to make me more unconfident in social interactions,
right?
Made me more confident in the classroom. So a lot of times you think you could run away from the problem, but all you're doing is you're spilling it over to another part of your life.
It's a good point. Yeah, I see that with clients. So I'm kind of doing things backwards here. I usually like to start off with the question, but I really wanted to get to your personal story for listeners to hear it, because it set the stage for everything else. I usually ask my guests, what 3 people, alive or dead, would you want to talk to or have a conversation with if you could pick anybody?
Okay, so one of the guys is Kobe Bryant. Bryant is
okay.
Yes, so Kobe Bryant is when I first moved to this country, he was one of the few basketball players that I was watching a lot, and I had an immense amount of respect for him. I genuinely thought that he was he had this killer instinct, this drive, and I loved his mentality, and I still do to this day. I have his book, Mamba Mentality, which is a very good read. I would recommend that. The second person is The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. You like him as well?
That's just great. Yeah, I think that's a great pick.
Yes, and the reason I picked Dwayne Johnson is because he is he's living proof that you shouldn't put yourself in a box. And you see this too often. You see people put themselves in a box, like, oh, well, I'm a wrestler, that's all I'm going to be. But he's someone that was able to do acting, and he became really successful in it. So I did respect that. And the third one is going to seem very peculiar, very out there, but it's going to be Conor McGregor. And I'm choosing Conor McGregor because I liked his story about how he went from being a plumber who was just scraping by to becoming like a megastar for the UFC. So if we were to ever have a conversation, I'm really sure that I can learn a lot about like the mental toughness that it took to turn his narrative around in our interaction. So those are the 3.
Wow. I love that I asked that toward the end of our episode, because that is a real synthesis that it illustrates your virtues and things that you find worthwhile, because they all have some ideal that relates to what you teach, like taking your story where you want it to go, not limiting yourself. They're all athletic too, and they all have larger than life personalities. So I'd actually like to see them all in a room together. Let's
that would be very unique. They need to do a podcast episode.
That would be ridiculous. I think I'd have to have like a super powered mic so that it wouldn't explode with all the words coming. Yeah. super powered audio system. I mean, so this has been great. I really want to thank you. I want to direct listeners to an article you did, I think relatively recently, about the 11 common communication errors. Is that recent, or is that?
Yes. So I wrote that, I think like 3 to 4 days ago.
Well, I love it because interruption is a big problem now. Lecturing, giving unwanted advice is another beautiful thing to put in there, because that's the key differential between a therapist or someone who's trained in some therapeutic art versus someone who thinks they're being helpful and is well-intentioned, but says horrible things that hurt people more than help. Unwanted advice, like criticizing people in ways that, they already know they have a problem. Why are you going to compound it? Like for someone with a health issue, well, have you tried sleeping? Well, yeah, they probably have. It's ridiculous to some people say out there.
Right.
But if you don't really have a good foundation on a topic, it's probably a good idea to just refrain from really going out of your way to give people advice on it, because it could do more damage than good.
It can. And a lot of people, they approach it from their own perspective. So
yes,
they mean well. Don't get me wrong, they mean well, but ultimately, in many cases, it has the adverse effects.
It does. And so what I love about your story is it's so relatable. Male, female, young, old. Public speaking, as you said, is a massive, massive issue with people of all socioeconomic and demographics. So I think that's why it resonates with so many, is you take it and you say, this is what I went through. It's my journey. See if you find some commonalities in it. I think you do that in a way that makes it very easy for people to project their own experiences onto it and relate to you.
That's great. And I genuinely hope that your listeners, anyone that's struggling with public speaking,
yes,
it's definitely a skill set. And whether it's my story or your personal story, use it as a springboard for making certain incremental steps. You see what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to overcome speech anxiety in one day, but keep on exposing yourself to the situation. It's going to improve over time.
Yes, so that's a perfect place for us to wrap up today. Wrap up with that joke you told me, the Jerry Seinfeld joke. I want to get that in here. I think we lost it last time.
Yeah, I think we lost it. Okay, so Jerry Seinfeld was really surprised when he heard that public speaking was the #1 fear in the world.
Right.
He said, so if you're at a funeral, the guy giving the eulogy is worse off than the person in the casket.
I love that.
So it gives you perspective.
It does. All right, listen. Anything you want to add here before we sign off? This has been a pleasure. I think you've hit us with a lot of good stuff.
No, you mentioned it, Jeremy. For your listeners, if you want to stay updated with me, check out the ArmaniTalks.com website. And be sure to sign up for my free daily newsletter there, where I drop a new email every day regarding the 5 soft skills. And I share personalized insights, stories, and tactics to help you level up. You'll find it in the ArmaniTalks.com website.
Love it. And your book, let's plug that. What's the name?
Let's plug that in as well. It's called Level Up Mentality, a guide to re-engineering your mindset for confidence. But if you go on Amazon and you just type in Level Up Mentality, it'll be the first one that pops up. You can get it on Kindle or paperback. So you'll really enjoy the book, a lot of practical steps to really help you re-engineer your mindset.
There you go. All right, everybody. So go catch up with Armani Talks through his many publications online and his publication on Amazon, Level Up Mentality. All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Jeremy.